Let me start off talking about this little flea market segment first by going over a couple of recent acquisitions that were eBay related. First of which is I actually picked up a book, an original. This is an original, as is quite visible by the staining. Operator's Handbook for Hendey Lathes. This is a fourth edition. I got this for about $15, which I thought was reasonable for an original book. Although the outside is pretty tattered and stained, the pages on the inside are in good shape. What I didn't realize about this book, and what the seller didn't mention in the listing, he had nothing in the picture for scale. So when I saw this book, I had no idea until when it came in that it's actually pretty much a pocket-sized version of the book. Now I think there is a larger version of this book. There is also currently someone on eBay right now that is selling. Basically what they did was they got a hold of one of these original books and they scanned it and turned it into a PDF file that you can get, that they'll they'll basically email it to you after you pay them. I think it's $10. So if you want a PDF version of this, you can pay $10 for it on eBay and they'll send you a PDF version. However, do a Google search, because there is a website. I'll try and put the name up. It's got a name like Poncetran, but it's not Poncetran. I keep thinking of Lake Poncetran out there in New Orleans, but it's not Poncetran. Something like that, though. And they've got a version, one of the editions of this manual, online for free for anybody to download. So I got this manual, and I was a little disappointed when I the thing is that my lathe, the vintage of my lathe, it's basically it's the same vintage of the cone head era, and it was ordered from the factory with the optional at the time gearbox. So this particular manual has mostly information about the cone head version right there. That's basically very close to my lathe. Different legs, obviously, and different feet. But this whole section right here is basically my lathe. Take this headstock off, put the gear headstock on, and that's my lathe. So there's a lot of neat information in here. Testing spindle alignment, faceplate alignment, blah 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 blah. This is the later, because this is the fourth edition. So this actually shows the later gear heads. I believe this is like a 12-speed gear head. So I've got the earlier gear head. I think there's actually a picture of that one in here too. If not, if you go online and look at the older version of this manual, it actually shows a picture of the 8-speed gear head, which is what I've got, the hook head. But unfortunately, it basically just shows it and talks about it, and then it doesn't really say much more. Oh, this is interesting. Here's the thread chasing dial on end of carriage. A lot of people say you don't need a threading dial on a Hendey lathe because of the way that the lead screw works. I'll get more into that when I start learning more about threading. But got a guy who was scrapping a 16-inch lathe. They scrapped the 16-inch lathe at his work. He was trying to get me several parts off of it, and then ended up getting scrapped. And he actually was kind of unhappy because he was led to believe that they were going to try and keep the lathe so he could get parts off of it, and they ended up scrapping it. The only thing he was able to grab off of it was the U-shaped piece that he was going to send to me for my lathe, but it turns out on his, the 16-inch lathe, the tapering jig was larger, so that part was a different size. So I couldn't get that from him. But he did grab also the threading dial. He's going to list that U-shaped piece on eBay for somebody who might have a 16-inch Hendey that they broke that piece on. But he's going to send me the threading dial. I think he said there was a bracket too. Now, let me show you on my Hendey, there is a homemade threading dial. So I think, if memory serves me from what I was reading, the idea here is that what you do on a Hendey, so that you don't need the threading dial is what you do is you thread up to the point where you want to thread up to, and then you back out the cutting bit, and then on a regular lathe you would disengage the half nut, manually run the carriage back to the beginning, and use your threading dial to figure out exactly where you want to engage the half nut to make sure that the next cut is in line with the threads. Well, on the Hendey, what they basically say you do is you don't disengage the half nut. You actually reverse direction with the lever down that end. Sorry about the light down there, but now I'll go over controls on this thing once I've got it set up and running. But down there, there's a lever that reverses the direction of the lead screw. And so once you do that, you keep the half nut engaged the entire time, and in that way you never lose, supposedly you never lose that indexing, or for lack of a better term. But apparently this looks like the work of my old friend who passed away. This looks like right up his alley, this kind of a homemade little deal here. What he's got a little bent piece of, looks like maybe aluminum. Made a little bracket. He just kind of got one screw in there holding it on. He's got a little gear. Who knows where he found that gear, but apparently it's the right pitch that it engages the teeth, engages the grooves on the lead screw here. He's got a little bit of white paint on one spot right there, and I think he was using this as a very crude threading dial. So that being said, even though it's not required apparently on the Hendeys, as the manual shows, some of them did have it. I would think the advantage of a threading dial would be if you're threading a long screw or a long shaft, I would think there's a benefit to being able to throw out the half nut and manually run the carriage back quickly with your hands. The guys who really know how to use a lathe properly and are proficient at it, if you've ever seen them thread, it's almost, they don't even think about it anymore. It's a muscle memory kind of thing. Oftentimes they don't even need to look at the controls. They know their lathe well enough. They know right where the hand wheel is. They know right where the half nut lever is, and they're looking at the work the whole time that's revolving in there. And they can reach down and, without missing a beat, throw out the half nut. Pull out the cross slide, I believe, and then again, I'm not a lathe operator. I never claimed to be. I hope to learn, and I'm always willing to learn. You're never too old to learn, that whole thing. But anyways, I'm kind of getting off track here. So I'm still happy to get this book, even though it doesn't really apply. There's a lot of neat little things in here. There is a carriage stop. There's another guy with a 16-inch lathe that they're scrapping parts off of. A lot of the parts aren't going to work. He's got a steady rest. Not going to work on this lathe because mine's a 12 and his is a 16. But he's got a carriage stop I'm going to try and get from him because I think the V-way is going to be the same dimension. So I'm pretty sure that'll work. I've got a micrometer stop on there now, but it wouldn't hurt to have a second one. And so here's our old friend. This is what I was talking about in one of the other videos on the Hendey. This is the diagram I was talking about. So this piece here is a piece that I've never had. There's a homemade version of it on there now. This rod right here is one of the things I bent in the attempt when I was trying to move it down the bulkhead stairs. This U-shaped long piece right here, I'll just use this as a pointer. That's the piece I broke the end off of. And then, as I now discovered, underneath this cover here, there's a long bar-shaped piece that attaches to the back of the cross slide, that the end of it was broken and someone had fashioned a homemade fix. That's this piece right here. This is originally this piece came out, and this is a block of metal that was made and screwed onto the end of this broken piece. But the original piece that was on here, not only did it complete this circle, but it also had a piece that stuck up over here that the rod went through that engaged that U-shaped piece and acted as the thread depth stop for turning tapered threads.